Karaoke? Yeah, it's going to be karaoke today.
Don't quit your day job.
Don't quit.
Okay.
Nice job.
We can work together.
You didn't come last time. Not last time. Was it about 2 weeks ago? Something 2 weeks ago.
For the stuff I did straw.
Oh, I didn't hear about it. Nobody was here till about an hour. Will you call me and let me know? Yeah, I did. You did?
Probably the first time I didn't get your
But that cable's supposed to...
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All council present. And vote for purposes off the record. We can just get Ms. Tisdale back on the stand.
Ms. Tisdale. Ms. Tisdale.
I'm sorry, Ms. Tisdale. Back for the record, Mr. Tisdale has stepped aside. All counsel present. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want your step again for me. Are we all ready?
Okay. Ms. Tisdale, so we're talking now about your pregnancy with the defendant. The defendant is your only child, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Did you have any complications or difficulties during the course of your pregnancy with the defendant?
No, I did not.
All right. And did you carry the defendant to full term?
Yes.
And I understand that as a result of prior medical conditions, you had a C-section delivery, is that correct?
Yes.
Were there any complications in the delivery of the defendant?
No.
Such as your umbilical cord being wrapped around his neck, anything of that nature?
No.
Did he suffer any injuries, any broken bones, anything of that nature during the course? During the course of the delivery?
No.
Okay. Now, after the defendant's birth, are you aware of whether or not he had tested positive for the presence of cocaine in his system?
I would say yes.
You would say yes? Okay. As a result of that, did you observe or notice any problems or concerns with the defendant's behavior in the early period of his life, say the first several months of his life?
No, besides me have a little shakiness.
Okay. And did he overcome that shortly?
Yes.
Okay. Kind of jumping forward, and then we'll come back to this particular time frame, but throughout the course of his life, fair to say the defendant never suffered any significant injuries, is that correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. I know you told me in the course of the deposition that he might have had an issue with an Achilles tendon, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, but other than that, he was never involved in any traumatic events such as a car wreck, is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. During the course of time, and when you say not to your knowledge, obviously you were with him from birth, and he was living with you up until what point in time in 2000?
2007.
Okay. All right. So obviously if he had been involved in a significant car wreck, that would be something you would have known about, correct?
Correct.
If he had been involved in a significant fall, say from a ladder or from a tree or something of that nature, that's something you would have been aware of, correct?
Correct.
The defendant was never hospitalized for any broken bones, is that right?
Not to my knowledge.
Right.
Correct.
And the defendant was never hospitalized between his birth and 2007 with any significant head trauma or head injury, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I appreciate what you're saying. You say not to my knowledge, but you lived with him that entire time. If the defendant was
correct.
hospitalized for a significant injury to the head or brain damage or trauma to the head, you would have known about that, right?
Yes.
Okay. During the let's talk about the first year of the defendant's life. Did you continue to take him to, and I know I screwed this up in the deposition as well, the doctor who monitors a child as they're growing, the gynecologist or whatever, pediatrician. Did you take the defendant to regular pediatrician visits?
Yes.
Okay. And did the defendant get all of his shots in those first visits to the pediatrician?
Yes.
And did you identify or notice any developmental delays, or did the pediatrician identify any developmental delays in the defendant in the first year of his life?
No.
Okay, and I know that having looked at these doctors' records, there's like a chart, and it talks about the child's weight and the child's height, and if they're developing normally. Did the defendant kind of develop normally during that first early formative years of his life?
Yes.
Did the defendant begin walking at an appropriate age? I don't know what that age would be, but 5 would be too late, and 6 might be a miracle. 6 months might be a miracle. But did he begin to walk at an appropriate age?
Yes.
Okay. What about reading? I talked to you during the course of your deposition about when he began to read. Did you read to him?
Yes, I did.
You and him spent a lot of time reading books, and you started at a very early age, didn't you?
That's correct.
And in fact, it's your testimony during the course of the deposition that he began to read at a very early age, correct?
Yes.
And again, and I hate to keep coming back to your cocaine use, but it's appearing as he's developing from birth, there doesn't seem to be any significant adverse effects from your moderate cocaine use for that 60 to 90 days. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay. Did the defendant start school on time?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so that's kindergarten, and you start like at 5 years old or somewhere around there, right?
Yes.
Okay. How did he perform in kindergarten?
He performed fine. He adjusted.
Okay. So learning
Well.
his colors, learning his alphabet, continuing to learn how to read, is that
Yes.
right? Okay. At some point in time from between kindergarten and, say, 4th grade, I understand that he progressed such that he was put into some type of a gifted program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when that was in his education?
No, I would say approximately between the 3rd and 4th grade, he went from one school to a gifted program.
Okay, so one of the things the defense offered into evidence today was kind of a history of the schools that he attended. And he started off in kindergarten at Westward Elementary, and was there for 1st, 2nd, and 2nd grade. And then in 3rd grade, he went to Limestone Creek Elementary.
Yes.
Okay, was that when he transitioned into a gifted class?
No.
No?
It was after that.
Okay,
We was
4th
there
grade,
for a
he was
while.
at Lighthouse Elementary?
That would be the gifted program.
Okay, and then back to Limestone for 5th grade, is that right?
Okay.
Okay, and with regard to the move from Lighthouse to Limestone, do you know what precipitated that? Why you all moved to a different school?
The gifted program was at Lighthouse, and that's why he went there.
Okay, but he went back to Limestone.
Went back to
Creek.
Limestone.
Okay, do you know why you went back to Limestone or no?
No, I would say that gifted program may have been for a certain period of time, and then he went back to Limestone Creek Elementary.
Okay, so at some point in time during the defendant's education, he began to take some of the state's numerous statewide exams, assessment exams, and FCATs and things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
And do you remember how he performed in those particular exams?
I would say passing.
Do you recall indicating that at some point in time he had ranked in the 90th something percentile?
That's when he had went to Survival Charter School, and then they had him to enroll in college.
Okay. So that's the 11th and 12th grade?
Say correct.
Okay. Now, during the course of his, were you involved in his school life? You know, some parents are PTA members. Do you know if you're a PTA member?
I attended his sessions at school, PTA meetings.
Okay. All right, so if you had a center day where the parents come in, you would attend those events?
Yes.
And if the teacher had a teacher work day where the teacher set aside time at the end of the day or in the evening to talk to a parent about how their son or daughter is doing, you attended those as well?
That's correct.
Okay, so you stayed involved in your son's education throughout these years, is that
I
correct?
would say yes.
All right. During the course of his time in elementary school and into middle school and into high school, the defendant had no real disciplinary problems. Would you agree?
I would agree.
I think there's something you talked about at one point in time, maybe smoking a cigar that might have got him jammed up a little bit, but
Yes.
other than that, in terms of his classroom behavior, nothing real significant disciplinary-wise, correct?
Correct.
Ultimately, he graduated from high school, is that right?
He's graduated from Survivor Charter.
Okay.
Yes.
But that got him a high school diploma?
Yes.
And from there, he went to get his AA or AS degree in architectural drafting at Lincoln College, correct?
Yes.
Right. Now, because you were an involved parent, because you communicated with his teachers, because you stayed informed on his progress in school, can you tell us if there was ever any point in time throughout your son's educational career that he was diagnosed with a learning disability, say dyslexia?
No.
No. How about a behavioral disorder such as attention deficit disorder or hyperactive attention deficit disorder?
He was never diagnosed.
during your son's life up until when he moves out in 2007, so he would have been 20, how old would he have been in 2007?
In his 20s.
Okay, all right. During that period of time with you, when he was living with you, had he ever been diagnosed with any type of a mental disease or disorder?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And again, I'm talking about the period of time that was with you. Had you ever been committed to a Baker Act facility for a mental disease?
Well, no. We had a Baker Act regarding his marijuana usage at one time. The family came together.
Okay, there
to
was
do a
kind of an
Baker
intervention
Act.
because of his marijuana use, and you had him Marchman acted, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm talking about anything such as, was he ever diagnosed with any type of depressive disorder, major depression, bipolar disorder, simple depression, anything of that nature?
No, sir.
Okay. No indications or experiences with psychotic events, seeing things, or psychiatric events such as seeing things or hearing things or experiencing bizarre type behaviors, correct?
Correct.
During the course of his life, he had good anger management control capabilities. Don't you agree?
I would say yes.
Okay. And in fact, you specifically referred to him being non-impulsive and not lacking in self-control, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In other words, he had good self-control, didn't he?
I would say yes, yes.
We talked a little bit during the course of your deposition about his reaction to being disrespected by somebody. Do you remember that conversation we had? I know it was
Vaguely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and when I asked you about, how he might react to somebody showing him disrespect, do you recall saying something to the effect that he tried to talk it through as opposed to impulsively acting out violently?
Yes.
And that's who he was, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, now we know that for a period of time when you moved from New Jersey to Florida, you lived with one of your sisters, right?
Yes.
And which sister was that?
Vanessa.
And how old was the defendant when you moved to Florida?
Approximately over 1 year of age.
And how long did you live with Vanessa and the defendant then at that stage of his life?
Maybe approximately close to maybe a year.
Okay. So he's about 2 or so when you move out of Vanessa's house?
Correct.
When you came to Florida, did you get a job right away?
Yes, I did.
All right, and you are presently employed and have been continuously employed by generally the Department of Motor Vehicles here in the state of Florida, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, after you leave Vanessa's, you move in with another friend, is that right, for a short period of time? Is that right?
It may be for a short period of time, correct, until I got my own apartment.
You moved to Boss Lane?
Yes.
Okay, tell the judge what kind of neighborhood Boss Lane was.
It was a predominantly white neighborhood. It was a gated community.
Safe community?
I would say so, yes.
How old was the defendant when you lived there on Boss Lane?
Approximately maybe between the age of 3, 4 years of age. 2 is hard. I'm just trying to think of the year when I moved there. It was sometime in the 89 to 90.
Okay, and how long did you live on Boss Lane?
Approximately about maybe 2 years, and from there I got my own apartment.
Okay. The period of time that you lived on Boss Lane, was the defendant in school at that time?
Yes, he was.
Okay. So when we see one of these school changes, it would be because you moved from Boss Lane, and this is when you get your house in Jupiter, is that?
No, not at that time. I didn't get the house in Jupiter till 95.
Okay. So where did you go from? So anyways, Boss Lane address is a good, secure, safe community, correct?
Yes.
Defendant play outside with other kids? And
Yes.
Okay.
Not too often.
Right, still young.
Yes.
You moved from Boss Lane to where?
Executive Center Drive.
Okay. And how was that community?
Gated community, the majority are white.
Okay. Again, a safe, secure community?
I would say so, yes.
Right. You know, we're not talking about running gun battles in the street,
No.
drug dealing in the front yards and things of that nature, right?
Yes.
And did you live there all until you got your house in Jupiter?
Yes, approximately.
Okay, so how old would the defendant have been when you left that residence to move to Jupiter?
I would be guessing between the ages of maybe 5 and 6 approximately.
Okay.
I lived there, I think, about 2 years.
He was born in 87,
That's correct.
and you moved into your house in June?
95.
95. Let me just see if I can, my math's not so good either. Okay, so that's about 8 years. He would have been about 8 years old?
Approximately.
Okay. All right, and then let's talk about, you moved, during this time, obviously you were a single parent, correct?
Yes.
Right. And you were very selective, you told me in your deposition, about where you lived because you were a single parent and you were worried about yours and his safety, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you consider yourself a very protective parent of him? Were you
I would say
protective?
yes.
Okay.
Very sheltered, yes.
Did you just wander off and leave him at home alone to fend for himself when he was a young child?
No, I never did that.
Okay. When you had to go somewhere, whether it be to work or to church or shopping, and you weren't taking him with you, did you arrange to have a responsible adult to babysit him?
I would say yes. Most of the time he would be with me if we were going to church or...
Right, right. The majority of the time he's with you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you purchased this home in, it's Limestone Creek, right?
Yes.
And when you first got into the Limestone Creek community in 1995-ish, it was brand new, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you and the defendant were one of the first families to move into this community, correct?
There were other families there prior to, but it was dirt roads and stuff. It was undeveloped.
Right. They're
Yeah.
putting water in and all that stuff.
That's
when you were
correct.
moving in. Okay.
Yes.
And the initial period of time that you lived in Limestone Creek as it was developing and so forth, how would you describe that community?
Very quiet.
Okay.
They had a neighborhood watch. We were very active in the community with Commissioner Marcus, cleanup groups.
You talk about the defendant would assist, you and he would spend time together and help clean up the community and things of that nature.
That's correct.
All right. And that neighborhood was, at this point in time, safe and secure, correct?
Yes, it was undeveloped. Wasn't too many homes there at that time.
Now, we know from testimony from your sisters and some testimony from some of the experts in the penalty phase that there came a point in time where perhaps you began to see some drug dealing activities and things of that nature in the Limestone Creek community. Is that correct?
Yes.
About how long after you moved in 1995 would you estimate you started to see that type of activity?
I would say approximately 2004 and up, it started getting rough.
Okay, so
approximately.
It's about 9 years after you moved in there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so for that 9-year period, it was still a relatively safe, secure, and decent community to live in, correct?
I would say yes.
That would take us up to about the defendant's 17th birthday,
Okay.
right? If we got 8 when you moved in and 9 more years, that's 17. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the defendant's father. How long did you know the defendant's biological father before you became pregnant with the defendant?
I would say prior to February 1985, approximately, yes.
Okay. And the defendant, obviously, what you indicated to me is that you and the defendant's father kind of parted ways and he didn't even know you were pregnant when you left. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the defendant had, as we know from the record, no relationship or dealings with his biological father, correct?
Yes.
All right. During the period of time that you spent with the defendant's biological father, did you know him to have, in his history, any type of mental health issues, mental diseases or defects?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did he ever communicate to you that the defendant's biological father, did he ever indicate to you that he came from a family that had a history of mental illness or disease?
No.
No? Okay. You described to me during the course of our deposition the defendant's father as being extremely intelligent or bright. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the basis for that? What was it about him that led you to believe he was very intelligent?
The organization that he was with, He did a lot of community events. He traveled a lot to various mayors' office. He met with King Hassan. I have pictures of that. Helping underdeprived children communities to see that they get a great start in life. They worked with several books for children, when I grow up, and trying to set a platform for them for their future.
Okay, and you had told me that he would make presentations to city councils and mayors and things of that nature, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Were you aware of any significant history of drug or alcohol abuse by the biological father of the defendant?
No.
Okay, or in his family?
No.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about these two topics in your family. And I know there's you and your two sisters, and that's the kind of the family unit that the defendant was raised in, correct?
Yes.
Coupled with their children and or their husbands, right?
Yes.
Okay. In your family, your parents and, going out in generations, if you will, any history of mental illness in your family? Any biological history of mental illness?
No.
Okay. Any history of significant long-term drug or alcohol abuse in your extended family?
Not maybe with my brother-in-law, Vanessa's husband.
Okay. And he would not be biologically a part of your...
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so you started work with the state of Florida, and again, I know it's a particular division, but I'm just going to, for ease of you and I talking here today, I'm going to call it the Department of Motor Vehicles, or DMV. You began working with DMV in what year?
1990, October 26th.
Okay, and that's the state of Florida, right?
Yes.
And you have worked for them then for the vast majority of your son's life, right?
Yes.
And through the state of Florida, were you provided with the benefits that we get? Some of us get as state employees of health care.
Yes.
Okay, and dental care.
Yes.
Okay, and did you take advantage of those programs through your employment?
Yes, I did.
And was the defendant obviously a beneficiary of those benefits?
Yes.
Now, I talked to you about this just a little bit. I know from your sister's testimony, and I know from your testimony in our deposition together, that you have, because you're a single parent, and even though you have a solid, good, full-time job, you also worked a second job. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think that the name of the company is Surface Chemicals, right?
Surface Chemist.
Chemist?
Yes.
Okay, do you still work for them?
Yes, I do.
All right, and you've been with Surface Chemist for how many years, do you
Over
think?
14 years.
All right. We heard from an individual who worked there, who owned Surface Chemist, I forget the young lady.
Alice Hudson.
Alice Hudson, that at some point in time the defendant worked there as well, right?
Yes.
And she also had indicated to us that there were occasions where you would show up to work to clean, and he'd be with you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Would those, remember when we talked a little bit ago about what you would do with the defendant when you had to be somewhere else, whether it be work or some other commitment? So on some occasions you would take him with you?
Yes.
Okay, you wouldn't just leave him home alone?
That's correct.
If you had to estimate for me, at approximately what age would the defendant have been when you would have felt comfortable as a parent to first leave him home alone, where you felt that he was mature enough and capable enough of managing his own affairs, staying safe and out of trouble?
I would probably say at the age around maybe 17, the age that we'll be able to drive a vehicle license, to have a driver's license.
In the ages of, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up in those ages there, would you be bringing him to work with you when you went? Okay.
Yes. He would
So-
assist me in cleaning.
And so you wouldn't be just leaving him at home to fend for himself, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you described your family and your sisters, and we've had an opportunity to meet them as a very close-knit family, right?
Yes.
And you you're obviously a hard-working woman. You held down 2 jobs. You provided a home. You provided health care. You provided clothing and food and care and sustenance for your child. You weren't alone. You had help from your family too, right?
Yes.
They were always there to assist you when they could, right?
Yes.
Okay. And some of the male individuals in your extended family, served as kind of role models for the defendant as well, correct?
Yes.
They might have had their own problems. Maybe one of them drank a couple of beers a night or 3 beers a night. But other than that, they were pretty decent men in his life, correct?
I would say yes.
You didn't have any concerns about leaving him alone with them, right?
No.
Or Vanessa or Noretta?
No.
You also talked to me a little bit about, as the defendant's growing, that he had some other males who might serve as kind of role models in his life. One of them was in kind of an after-school program. Do you remember that? Like a
Yes.
tutoring program?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
They had, in Jupiter, they had Jupiter Community Group where he would go after school and he would maybe be taught with other male role models to assist in education skills. He was very active. I've had him in T-ball and different community groups to be active with other individuals, other groups, youths his age.
Okay, and in church too, right?
Yes.
You had some
definitely.
male role models. You guys regularly attended church?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And so he had an opportunity to be exposed to good, decent Christian men.
I would say yes.
I want to just talk a little bit about the after-school program. Is this like he would go to the after-school program and then you would pick him up from there?
Yes.
Okay, so again, there's no gap in coming home on a school bus, being dropped off, being home alone. You're picking him up, bringing him home.
Yes.
I want to talk about discipline a little bit. We're almost done. Talk about how you discipline your son. There are 2 schools of thought. There's the time.
Depends on the age. Mostly talking with him. Sometimes I would use a belt, depending. But I would say you get to a certain age, you can't use the belt. So take different. As opposed to his life. Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
A lot of positive reinforcement, I think, is the word used. Reinforcement from the penalty case, there was a discussion of a fellow by the name of Lionel. Who is Lionel?
Lionel was a gentleman that I had met at one of my jobs.
Okay. And our conversation is that Lionel was I say a taskmaster, but what I see is a guy who was raised in the military and everything is done by the book and you do it this way or you do it wrong, kind of guy, right?
Yes.
And how long did Lionel live with you and the defendant?
A short period of time. I would say a couple of months. It may be under 6 months, approximately.
Okay. In your deposition, if you indicated 4 to 5 months, would that be approximately correct?
Yes.
All right. You had some issues with Lionel's parenting style as a result of this regimented effort.
Yes.
Tell us about
I was
he beat you, used you in front of the family. Never laid hands on you? So let's talk about that episode.
So he had a Lombard area. He had doors in front of so the front door of the house. And then I had Eric to return back to his room and noticed that that definitely wasn't going to work. So shortly after that,
In the doorway.
that's
How long would you estimate the defendant stood there? Were you present when this happened?
yes, I was present. I would say under a minute. Once I found out, what he was doing, then
You put a stop to that?
that's correct.
Immediately.
Immediately,
And then
he was gone.
Lionel's out of the house, right?
That's correct. Shortly after.
Right. And this stripped down situation, which ultimately triggered the removal of Lionel, only happened one time, correct?
As far as I know, in my presence, yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, Lionel never physically beat the defendant, correct?
Not to my knowledge, not in my presence, not that I know.
And you had the kind of a relationship with the defendant where if he was being regularly abused, physically, sexually, or otherwise by Lionel or any other human being, he would have told you that.
I would hope so, yes.
Okay. And you never observed any signs that he had been physically abused by Lionel, correct?
No, not to my knowledge.
Now, was there ever any other time in your period of living with the defendant where there were any other men who lived in the house with you?
Yes.
Okay. Was there ever any instances of physical abuse against you in the presence of the defendant during those time frames?
At one time on Boss Lane, I had a friend that came in drunk.
Okay.
And he tried to physically assault me, and my son picked up a little Harvey Warbanger bat. That's when I was on Boss Lane. And so that ceased.
Okay. He was out too?
He was out too.
Okay. Other than that, any other episodes or instances like that?
No.
Any suggestion from the defendant or any observations you made at any point in time of anybody outside of the family physically abusing or harming the defendant?
No, not to my knowledge. No.
Okay. And obviously you never physically abused or harmed the defendant, correct?
No.
All right, I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
If there's any questions.
Yes. Good morning.
You talked about your pregnancy with Eric. Where were you living at that time?
I was living in Orange, New Jersey.
Okay, and And were you living with family when you found out you were pregnant?
Yes, I was.
Who was it that you were living with?
It was a relative of mine, Pauline Tisdale.
Okay. And did you live with her during your entire pregnancy?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And at that time, did you have contact with the biological father?
At that time, no, I did not.
Okay, and at that time, actually, you didn't know who the biological father was, right?
At that time, that's correct.
Okay. So during the pregnancy, were you working?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to support yourself where
Yes.
you were? Was there ever a time where you were at a homeless shelter?
Never.
Okay. So you were able to support yourself during the entire pregnancy. Does that mean you worked during your entire pregnancy?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you told us earlier that there was some substance abuse and that after the birth there was birth tremors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, when you know better, you do better. So looking back at that time, would there be anything that you would have done differently during your pregnancy?
No, I continued to follow up with doctor visits. In fact, I had individuals come out to the house, nurse aides that came out right after I was had delivered the baby.
Okay. And when you delivered the baby, who did you have there supporting you?
I just had a relative. My family had been gone at that time.
So you were pretty much by yourself when
That's
you
correct.
were born?
Yes, that's correct.
So you went through pregnancy and the labor alone?
Yes, I did.
And was that very difficult for you?
It wasn't easy.
Okay, that's good. Now, at a certain time, you said that you decided to move to Florida, is that right?
That's correct.
Is that where your family was at the time?
Yes.
And is one of the reasons why you moved to have support from your family since you were a single mom?
Yes.
Now, at the time, you believe someone else was Erice's biological father?
That's
is that
correct.
right? Who was that? Mr. Norris?
Excuse me?
Is that Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Okay. And did Mr. Norris, did you tell him that he was the father?
It's a possibility, so we had the blood test done.
Before you had the blood test done, did he participate in Erice's life?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Did he come and visit Erice?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that you had a blood test done to determine paternity, is that right?
Yes.
And that was in 1999? Is that
Approximately.
okay. And so in 1999, that would have been about the year that Erice started 6th grade. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right.
Okay. So up until that time, you and Erice and Mr. Norris all believed Mr. Norris to be Erice's dad, right?
Yes.
And then was the news that Mr. Norris was not Erice's dad shocking to you?
Yes.
Was it also shocking to him?
Yes. You say to him, you're referring to?
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Did he continue to participate in Erice's life?
After that period, I would say no.
Okay. And what was Erice's reaction to that?
Surprisingly.
Now, you then believe that Erice's biological father was Randy Thornton, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you tell Erice about Randy Thornton?
Yes, I did.
What information did you have about him?
I had a booklet of a lot of work that he did in the community, the various organizations he was a part of, the books that he helped to produce.
Now, did you know where Randy Thornton was at that time?
At that time, no. At
Did you
that time.
later come to learn, did you look for him?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and what did you find out?
We found out he was incarcerated.
Okay, so he was actually in prison?
Yes,
And was he in prison for bank robbery?
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
All right. Now, did Randy Thornton die in prison?
Yes, I believe so.
So you were never able to communicate with him before he passed away?
That's correct.
Now you talked about the fact that you worked, obviously, because you were a single parent, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, go back. When you first had Erice, were you working at that time?
Yes, and I had retired from my job right after I had him, where I had worked for 14 years in New Jersey.
Were you able to stay home with him then?
I still worked.
Okay. All right.
You know, I retired from my job and then I relocated to Florida.
Okay. Did you breastfeed him?
No, I did not.
Okay. So when you were at work, he was at a daycare?
That would be correct.
How old was he when you first put him in a daycare?
I would say at the age of 4, he might have went to Head Start, a program like that prior to starting school.
Who took care of him when he was an infant?
That would have been in New Jersey. When I relocated here, he was like 1 or 2 years of age. So I'm just trying to think back who might have been watching him.
But you worked during that period, so there would have been a caretaker,
Yes,
someone who would have
yes.
taken care of him, whether it was
Definitely.
a daycare center or a person
Yes.
who was responsible for his daily care while you were at work. Is
Yes.
that right? And then when you moved to Florida, did you get a job here too?
Yes,
And he
immediately.
was about 1 or 2 years old then?
That's correct.
And so he would have also then been in a daycare or someone would have been watching him, is that correct? That was not you?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, I know, the prosecutor asked you earlier about how Eric did in school. Do you remember what his grades were, or do you not remember?
Yeah, I remember approximately. I mean, he, thank God he was always passing. If there was any notes on his report card for his teachers, mostly probably talking too much or tapping,
Okay.
you know.
So tell me about the talking too much. Was that something that surprised you?
No,
Why?
because I did the same thing when I was in school. My report cards talked too much in class.
Okay, so you were disruptive in class as well?
Well, talkative.
What about, were you a class clown?
Yes, I was.
Is that one of the things that the teachers used to describe Eric?
Yes.
Okay, and as far as homework, did you have to get him to do his homework, or was he one of those children that just came home and did their homework right away? And
Well, no, I would have to check his book bag. I believe that at that time they may have a book bag you sign off in, or to see what the requirements were to prepare for the next day.
And you told us earlier that after school, Eric went to an after-school program as well? Is
That's
that right?
correct.
Okay. Now, was there a time when Lionel was in the house that Eric would stay with Lionel after school and after?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't believe so.
So,
no.
you talked about other male role models, and I believe you talked about your sister's husband being one of the role models?
Yes.
Okay, and he's the one that had the drug problem?
Yes. Alcoholism.
Okay. And you talked also about there came a time when Eric moved out of Blunt Creek. Is that Limestone Creek? You took him out of there, right?
Yes.
And tell the court the reason why you took Eric out of Limestone Creek.
Because of the trafficking, the drug trafficking in the area.
As a matter of fact, who was living next door to you at the time?
I was a family, was quite a few siblings in the household. We had problems with drug trafficking in the area.
Okay. So Eric actually went to go live with your sister in West Palm Beach, is that right?
To remove him out of the area.
Okay.
That's correct.
And Eric wasn't doing too hot in school either during that time. He actually failed the 10th grade. Do you
I'm
remember
not
that?
sure.
And it'll be reflected in his school record.
Okay,
Such a factor
okay.
to that. But there was problems during that time.
That's correct.
Okay. And so he actually spent the last 2 years at your sister's house.
Yes.
And that's where he went to Survivors Charter School, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And it was at that time, so he started school in September at Charters, you got him in, and then that December is when you had the tragedy in your family that your sister's husband died on the operating table. Would
That's
that be
correct.
the correct timeline?
Yes.
Okay.
December 2004.
And then shortly thereafter, we're talking less than a couple of weeks, that your other sister's son is then killed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that what the
Yes.
timeline would be?
Yes, the same month.
And then that was Eric was actually senior year of high school.
I believe so, yes.
And he continued to finish out at Charter, at Survivors Charter that
Yes.
May. And he got his high school diploma from that.
Yes.
Okay. So during that time, Eric wasn't living with you, right?
No, he was not.
Okay. And then he went on to Lincoln College, a technical school, right?
Yes.
And during that time, he wasn't living with you either?
No, he was not.
Okay. And And then, there was a time though that you, sold that house in Limestone Creek and moved to Fort St. Lucie, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And actually, you and Eris bought that house together, is that right?
That's correct.
Eris was working at the time?
Yes, he was.
He had a good job?
Yes.
And he helped you to get the mortgage for that house?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, is that the same house, that in 2012 was foreclosed on?
That's good.
Okay.
Approximately, yes.
All right. So foreclosure happened before Eris lost his job at Suncoast Chemist. Do you recall?
I believe it was after that.
So, but was it in the same year, like a 6-month period, or same year that all that happened?
It's approximately, yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to finish up, but I just want to ask you, just because we're in a court of law and the judge is hearing testimony, you told us that your relationship to Eriese Tisdale, he's your son. Do you love your son?
Yes, I do love my son.
What is your relationship like with your son? Can you tell the court?
Until this incident happened, it was a very close relationship. My son, mostly everybody cared greatly for my son because of his personality and his character. He has always been very respectful of others, and I know it must have been something very traumatic to happen on February 28th for the reaction that took place. Something that was not captured.
Have you maintained that close relationship with your son since
Yes,
then?
yes, I have. Yes, I go to see him regularly.
And when you see him, do you also bring his son?
Occasionally I do, to make sure that he's not disruptive to others, depending on the timing. Yes, his son.
And how do you see that relationship between Eric and his son?
Getting closer. His son now is at the age, he's recognizing, he's communicating a little bit better. He knows the voices, he knows the faces, so he's responding to him quite remotely. He knows his voice, certain songs, things that they do together, you know, so he's identifying him as daddy, you know.
Does it look to you like it's a loving relationship?
Yes, it is. It would be a very loving relationship, yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor. We would release her for motion.
Thank you, Mr. Tisdale, very much. You can step up.
No, we don't, but I would like to address one final matter. Just kind of historically how I proceeded at the actual sentencing date, the date the court renders its sentence, is I asked the court's leave to call family members, community members who wish to make a statement, basically allocute, if you will, pursuant to the Florida Constitution of the Victims' Bill of Rights. I don't think it's appropriate to do it at the Spencer hearing, because it's not information upon which the court can render its ultimate sentence in the case. So it seems to me, and I know it's, you know, it seems to me the most appropriate time to do that is at the actual sentencing. So I'm asking the court at this time, in the event his mother or father or any other family members or wife Gary's family members wish to speak, or law enforcement, that I be given an opportunity to allow them to do that before the court renders its sentence, because it seems to me that's the appropriate time to do it.
I'll let anybody say anything they wish. Allocution type proceeding.
Okay.
Provided the state of defense comment to the court or mayor.
Thank you.
On either side.
That's it then. The state has no further evidence.
Would you present any other testimony?
No, Your Honor.
You don't want to make any argument now, or you want to wait till the sentencing?
Yeah, I'll make my argument in the sentencing memorandum.
That's all good.
How much time do you all need to
say, well, because of the holiday, 2 weeks.
And then if I'll just take 2 weeks after that, I'll respond. So a month or the day, we should have it all into you then, I would assume.
And 2 weeks from the day, if the defense will submit their sentencing memoranda or provide a copy to the state, and the state will have 2 weeks from the day it's submitted.
Okay.
That is, you'll have 2 weeks to respond. I'll consider it, and then I'll let y'all know when I'll just set up for final sentencing.
Okay.
Okay. Wait till I get on.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, they lost their mouth. So, okay, we got a time for
Pass it down.
and have my liver shake. That's when I was running marathons. Yeah, right. Where they take you? Wow. Where dinner? Somebody has to.